The shift from socialism to capitalism in countries that once practiced socialism is widely regarded as one of the most significant economic developments of the 20th century. Not only does it have an impact on the lives of billions of people, but it is also helping to drive a change in the focus in economics, away from the traditional pricing and monetary theory and the institutional context in which it operates. When you look at the changes that have happened in the economy, you can see how important institutions are and how their growth toward greater effectiveness depends on the conditions that were there at the start, as well as on the consistent political support. Also, it helps us better understand and see the wider picture of capitalism as an economic system, including how large scale institutional change works. Institutions determine how much influence individuals and authority have over the economy's resources. Inequitable institutions provide a significant barrier to advancement because they make it more difficult for people to get access to resources, grow their output, and even raise their incomes. A comparison of how countries' economies have grown over time has shown that institutions that favor elites and make it easy for them to take resources and goods are contributing factors to the continuation of economic stagnation.
Let's take a look at what happened in the Berlin Wall. After World War II, Germany ended up dividing into two separate countries, East Germany and West Germany. East Germany became a communist country under the control of the Soviet Union. West Germany, on the other hand, is a capitalist country, so most businesses are owned and run by private individuals. This separation led the creation of the Berlin Wall. Berlin was the capital of Germany, as people in East Germany began to realize that they didn't want to live under the rule of the Soviet Union and communism. So they started to leave the eastern part of the country and move to the west. Yet, the Soviet and East German leaders began to worry that they were losing too many people, so they built a wall around Berlin to prevent people from leaving. However, when the Soviet Union was beginning to collapse, they were losing their hold on East Germany. The borders were open, and people could freely move between Eastern and Western Germany. Much of the wall was turned down by the people as they celebrated the end of a divided Germany. That time, Germany was officially reunified into a single country.
Looking back into what we have learned about the USSR experience and socialism, we have learned that in 1928, Stalin introduced the first 5 year plan for building a socialist economy, which was based on the Guelro Plan. The Guelro Plan envisioned a major restructuring of the Soviet economy based on total electrification of the country. In place of the internationalism expressed by Lenin throughout the revolution in 1917, it aimed to build socialism in one country. The 5 year plan started on October 1st, 1928. In industry, the state assumed control over all existing enterprises and undertook an intensive program of industrialization. In agriculture, rather than adhering to the lead by example policy advocated by Lenin, forced collectivization of farms was implemented all over the country.
Although the industrial sector and the economy expanded, the Soviet Union did not achieve all of the goals it set out to accomplish in its first 5 year plan. Soviet's hard currency reserves eventually depleted as the resources were mismanaged, spending too much on armaments and space exploration. They were also busy adapting new technologies from the West to the extent that they neglected the things that they are good at, such as farming. The USSR is undeniably blessed with vast land which prior to industrialization were intended for agriculture. The Soviet Union undoubtedly underwent a transition from an agrarian state to an industrial one as a direct result of the first five-year plan. However, the transition was accomplished at a significant expense to the Russian people. When the five-year plan concluded in 1932, the nation was in the middle of a catastrophic food shortage. One of the deadliest famines in the human history was triggered by hasty industrialization initiatives. Historians estimate that the hunger killed up to 7 million people between 1932 and 1933. Some individuals died from malnutrition while others died from the cold while waiting in line for food. The famine was particularly severe in Ukraine and the Crimean Peninsula, which led to the highest number of fatalities.
However, just like what Ludwig von Mises said, that socialist economy is impossible to exist. Ludwig von Mises pointed out that the reason why a socialist economy is impossible to exist is due to the fact that the presence of economic calculation is nowhere to be found under the socialist central planning. He also declared in his article, quote unquote, without economic calculation, there can be no economy. Hence, in a socialist state wherein the pursuit of economic calculation is impossible, there can be, in our sense of term, no economy whatsoever. Socialism is the abolition of rational economy. Mises also highlighted the various vital conditions responsible for the existence and evolution of human society, composed of liberty, property, and sound money. Every individual is given the freedom to produce and has their products or services exchanged into certain value. These allow an individual to develop their own judgments and appraisals in determining the value of a product independently. Property means that there were no restrictions when it comes to owning producers' goods and consumers' goods. Lastly, sound money. Sound money refers to the presence of a legal tender that serves as a medium for everyone, in which its value does not depend on any sizable or unexpected variations. Mises emphasizes that omitting any of these three not only can bring havoc to the praxeological significance of time, but also invalidates the teleological ethics that humans have contributed in totality.
Though Mises' criticism regarding socialism is being misinterpreted both by his followers and opponents, he reiterated that without the existence of human calculation, the human economy will continue to struggle due to meager and continued tedious household process given with the minimal capital available and aiding their new desires would only mean stretching out their budgets to the fullest. Therefore, a socialist economy is impossible to exist as it does not only eradicate the economy and society but may also put human intellect and spirit at risk.
In general, the ease with which one may invest and do business in a given nation indicates the extent to which its economy has been liberalized. While all industrialized nations have already been through a series of transformations, developing countries still need to go through a number of different transitions first. The following are five consequences of liberalization in a country.
Reducing or removing obstacles to overseas investment. It may be quite difficult to invest in a nation with an emerging market if that country has many obstacles standing in the way of the foreign investors. Barriers to entry can come in many different forms, such as tax rules, limits on foreign investment, legal problems, and accounting requirements. All of this can make doing business in a country difficult, if not impossible. Reducing or removing this restriction and giving the private sector as a say in economic policy is the first step in the liberalization of the economy. Privatization and deregulation of the businesses are common methods used for this purpose.
Free flow of capital. The main goals of economic liberalization are to let money move freely between states and to make sure that resources and competitive advantages are well shared. This is often done by lowering tariffs, trade regulations, and other restrictions on trade. The rising inflow of capital lowers the cost of raising money from investors, which is one of the most important implications of this trend. Because capital costs are now lower than they were prior to liberalization, more businesses will be able to invest in successful initiatives.
Increase in stock value. When a nation liberalizes, the stock market usually follows suit and rises. Investors and people in charge of managing money are always looking for ways to make more money. The scenario is very much like the led up to and the funding of an IPO or the initial public offering. When a nation as a whole is put up for investment, it usually receives a large influx of capital. When the companies that used to be private but are now open to investors, they often follow the same pattern in terms of value and cash flow. But just like with an initial public offering, investors' excitement eventually wanes and returns go back to being more normal and in line with the company's fundamentals.
Reduced potential political hazards. As a result of liberalization, investors face less political risk. Foreign investment will only come in if the government keeps making improvements, not just in the areas listed above, but also in other areas. Some of these factors are a good way to settle legal disputes, clear and enforceable contract rules, property laws, and other things that give entrepreneurs and investors the confidence they need to open a business.
Investment portfolio diversification. Diversing a portfolio by putting some of it in a certain type of asset can lead to gains. There isn't much of a link between advanced nations like the United States and developing or rising nations, even though the risk of a rising nation by itself may be higher than average. Adding a low correlation asset could reduce this risk. It is important to remember though that this link could get stronger over time while being weak right after a country opens up. High levels of international integration could also increase the risk of contagion, which is the chance that crisis in one country could spread to others and causes internal instability. 2007 to 2008 financial meltdown was precipitated by precisely this scenario. At first, the weaker members of the European Union like Greece had serious financial problems, which quickly spread to the rest of the European Union. Due to how much the economies of European Union members are linked, investors who spread their money across many European countries face higher correlations and contagion risks.
In conclusion, most people agree that emerging and developing nations should pursue economic liberalization. The main goal is to encourage growth and efficiency at home by letting capital move freely both ways. What should pique the attention of investors are the ripple effects that might lead to a wider range of prospects for diversification and profit in the wake of liberalization.